Hello everyone, welcome back to the Will the Reaper channel. In today's video, I'm going to be determining how the Clash Royale cards would be treated if they got sent to North Korea, which they would basically be foreigners, which as most people know, North Korea has a very strict government. They're extremely hostile towards people that are not from their country, even those who are in their country. Their experiences there are not good. So I think this would be pretty interesting of a topic to explore. This idea was brought to us by Zhang Yan, WZ1ZL. So if you are currently watching this, please leave a comment in this video so I can pin you and give you a shout out for this video. Anyway, let's get down to it. I just worked 10 hours at my shift at my job, so I'm going to make this really quick and short. This is supposed to be a funny video. Um, Skeletons, well, they'd have weapons, so they would get imprisoned. Bomber would get imprisoned, right, because they have weapons. Probably experimented on, but at least imprisoned. Goblins, both the spear and the regular, both have spears and knives, so they would get imprisoned for holding weapons. Zap spell would just be experimented on. I mean, they would test out the zap spell. Knight has a sword, you get imprisoned. Archers have bows and arrows, they get imprisoned. Even though minions have dark elixir, I think they get experimented on, if anything. Arrows would just be kept for experimentation, right? They might want to check like DNA or something like that. Cannon would probably be experimented on. Tesla would be experimented on. Motor would be experimented on, right? If they're from other countries and stuff, they definitely test out the firepower of each of these different buildings. Barbarians have swords, they're getting imprisoned. Minion hordes getting experimented on. Tombstone's getting experimented on. Musketeer has a musket, she's getting imprisoned. Valkyrie has an axe, she's getting imprisoned. Hog Rider has a hammer, a huge hammer, he's getting imprisoned. Mini P.E.K.K.A. is probably getting experimented on. Well, actually, he has a sword, so he's probably getting imprisoned and then experimented on, kind of like the goblins and skeletons. Fireball's getting experimented on. Bomb Tower is, well, the bomber himself would get imprisoned, but the tower itself would get experimented on. Goblin Hut would probably get imprisoned, because it's just a building that spawns goblins. Actually, no, Bomb Tower get imprisoned then, for the firepower. Giant's getting probably experimented on because he doesn't hold any weapons, but he's still a threat, and they would definitely want to see how a giant would be made. Wizard, he has fire, so that would probably get you in prison. Inferno Tower's getting experimented on. Rocket's getting experimented on. Elixir Collector's getting experimented on. Barbarian Hut, all the barbarians inside would get in prison and stuff. Mirror's getting experimented on. Rage Spell's getting experimented on. Skeleton Army's getting imprisoned. They all hold knives. Goblin Barrel is getting imprisoned because it holds goblins with knives. Baby Dragon's getting experimented on. Free Spell's getting experimented on. Witch is gonna get imprisoned for sorcery. Prince is getting imprisoned for his lance. The Balloon is getting imprisoned for all the bombs and gunpowder. Giant Skeleton is getting imprisoned for his bomb on his back before getting experimented on like the regular giant. Lightning Spell's getting experimented on. Expo's getting experimented on. P.E.K.K.A, like the mini P.E.K.K.A, is getting imprisoned, and then experimented on. Golem's getting experimented on because he doesn't hold a weapon, but still lethal. Royal Giant, kind of like actually no, Royal Giant holds a cannon, so he's getting imprisoned for carrying a weapon, then getting experimented on. Musketeers, the three of them, they're getting imprisoned for having guns. Dark Prince is getting imprisoned for his mace or whatever. Poison Spell's getting experimented on. Princess is getting imprisoned for holding arrows. Ice Wizard is getting imprisoned for, I guess, sorcery as well, kind of like the regular wizard. Technically, it'd be called firepower, I guess you'd want to call it. Fire Spirit's getting experimented on. Furnace is technically imprisoned, kind of like the witch, because the staff is technically firepower. Guards are getting imprisoned, probably for treason, for serving a different king or power, but also because of their weaponry. Miner is probably getting exiled. Because he's just a miner, right? So he would have an actual job, probably like a construction worker, but he's getting exiled. Um, not from North Korea, but kind of like no one would talk to him. So he'd either get exiled from the country or he would get, kind of cast aside. No one paid attention to him. Sparky's getting imprisoned. It's literally a huge cannon. And then they'd have to experiment on it. Lava Hound is getting experimented on. Ice Spirit's getting experimented on. Bowler is technically imprisoned because the boulder would technically be like a weapon, I guess you could call it, and then getting experimented on. Log is getting experimented on. Lumberjack is getting imprisoned because not only does he wield an axe, but he also has elixir, which would basically be drugs. Snow Golem's getting experimented on. Mega Minions getting experimented on. Inferno Dragons getting experimented on. Graveyard spells getting experimented on. Elite Barbarians are getting imprisoned. Tornado spells getting experimented on. Clone spell is really getting experimented on. Electro Wizard, I feel like imprisoned, then experimented on. Goblin Gang imprisoned. Dark Goblin is imprisoned. Battering Ram itself is technically a weapon, but yeah. I guess the barbarians with the battering ram would get imprisoned. Executioner is getting imprisoned. He holds a weapon. Bats are getting experimented on. Heal Spirit's getting experimented on. Bandit is getting imprisoned because she holds the rolling pin and she's using it as a weapon. Witch would probably get imprisoned. That staff would be deemed as a weapon. Skeleton Barrel is getting experimented on. Flying Machine is getting imprisoned and then tested. I feel like Cannon Cart would get experimented on. Mega Knight's getting imprisoned. He is getting the death penalty probably. Zappies are probably getting imprisoned. Barbarian Barrel is getting imprisoned. Hunter's getting imprisoned. He has a gun. Royal Ghost is getting imprisoned and then probably experimented on for, they want to probably test medical technology at how long he's able to live for, like how a ghost is able to be real. So he's definitely getting experimented on. And I've been saying experimented on a lot. Sorry for rambling. Again, I'm trying to get this done quickly. Magic Archers getting imprisoned. Bandits are getting imprisoned. Or Rascals are getting imprisoned, my bad. Snowball's getting experimented on. Royal Recruits are getting imprisoned for treason and for holding weapons. Royal Hogs are probably getting imprisoned because they served a different power. If they served the king in Clash Royale, that would technically be imprisonment. I kid you not. I think that is genuinely how they would be treated. Goblin Giant holds I guess since the goblins on his back hold weapons, he would also be imprisoned. Electro Dragon's getting experimented on. Ram Rider has a weapon. She's imprisoned. Wall Breakers are getting imprisoned. Their barrels are explosives. Earthquake Spell is experimented on. Goblin Cage. Technically, if it's a criminal, right, that's in there, they're technically going to arrest him. Fisherman, much like the miner, is getting exiled because even though the grappling hook I feel like is technically like a weapon, I don't think they care that much. I think you would just say he's a fisherman and then they'd be like whatever. But much like the miner, like they're getting ostracized. No one's gonna care about the fisherman. They're gonna treat him badly. Elixir Golem's getting experimented on. Battle Healer is technically gonna get in prison because she wields a sword, and then probably experimented on. Firecracker is imprisoned. Royal Delivery, feel like would be imprisoned. Skeleton Dragons are definitely experimented on. Electro Spirit is experimented on. Electro Giant is imprisoned because his electric shock would hurt people, and then he's probably getting experimented on. Mother Witch, imprisoned. The staff is like a weapon. Goblin Drill is definitely getting imprisoned. Golden Knight imprisoned for wielding a sword. Archer Queen imprisoned for wielding an expo. Skeleton King imprisoned for wielding a mace. Mighty Miner imprisoned for wielding a gigantic drill. But if the drill's not enough, the bomb on his back, right, holding explosives, imprisoned. Phoenix is getting experimented on. Monk is probably exiled, right? He's just a martial artist. He doesn't have any weapons on him, but I don't know. Unless the monk is North Korean or something like that, I don't think the government take too kindly to him. He's probably getting exiled. Little Prince is getting imprisoned. He holds a crossbow. Void spells experimented on. Goblin Demolisher is imprisoned. The firecrackers are weapons. Goblin Curse experimented on. Goblin Machine is imprisoned. Suspicious Bush is imprisoned because the people inside hold weapons. Goblin Stein is probably imprisoned. Because the North Koreans would probably be like, that's crazy that he would take dead people and put them together. So he's probably getting imprisoned, if not experimented on. Rune Giant, the hammer is seen as a weapon, imprisoned. Berserker is imprisoned because the axe. Boss Bandit is a criminal, so she'd get imprisoned, and also the weapon she would use. Spirit Empress holds a sword, that's a weapon, imprisoned. Same thing with Spirit Empress on a dragon, imprisoned. Find spells experimented on. And then all the tower troops have weapons with them, so they are all getting imprisoned. Maybe the royal chef though is, I don't know. The spatula is not weapon-like enough, I guess. Even though the royal chef does use a spatula as a weapon, like I feel like he can convince people that he's just a chef, which in that case, he's still getting exiled. Anyway, sorry for saying the words experimented on like 30 times in a row. I'm so tired. I just want to make this a quick video. But if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing, as it would truly help me out a lot. And as per usual, if you guys agree or disagree with this video, please let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, as it would truly help me out a lot. And as always, I hope you all enjoyed this video. I'll see you in the next video, and take care. Have a good night.